Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to episode 57 of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside another very special guest, and today we're talking about the Chicago Bears. The Bears fired head coach Matt Nagy and general manager Ryan Pace. Joining me to talk about those decisions and the future for the Bears is Andy Hopper, the host of the Brew Party Podcast. Andy, welcome. It must feel like Christmas morning for you on Black Monday.
Listen, man, this is incredible. What a feeling. I have been calling for this. I've been asking for this, not only all this year, almost all of last year as well. It's just a day that I didn't think would come. But it has, and it just feels so sweet. It feels like Victory Monday, even though we blew that game yesterday, but it doesn't even matter. I just woke up this morning, was telling you, I got in my car, I looked down, and ESPN notification that Nagy's gone. A couple hours later, I checked my phone at work, and Ryan Pace is gone. And one of the happiest feelings I've ever had. Great, guys. Thanks for everything you did, which was really nothing, but see you later.
Yeah, I think this is the move the Bears had to make. I don't think this is a move that's really surprising to anyone. The Bears have been mediocre. The Bears need to find the future staff that's going to be around Justin Fields for what's going forward. So that was almost a guarantee, in my opinion, for the Bears. I mean, if you woke up today and found out that wasn't the move, I feel like you would have lost your freaking mind. I mean, this was a no-brainer here for the Bears.
Well, I got a little nervous. I won't lie. I was a little nervous yesterday because I was kind of expecting them to just fire him like after the game. Especially after the way that ended that second half. But it happens first thing Monday morning. I guess, credit the front office for letting them get back to Chicago and then firing them. But yeah, great feeling. Makes us excited for the future. It's like I said, Pace has been around for 7 years. In those 7 years, the Bears have had one winning season. And that was the 12-4 double doink year. Other than that, it was John Fox going, 5-11, 6-10. Then, you had Nagy go 12-4, 8-8, 8-8, and then again 6-11 this year. So you said it, mediocrity. That's what it has been. That's why we as Bears fans got so excited, during that 12-4 year, because it truly felt like we had something, and then that was our shot. And just in classic Chicago sports fashion, it ends and all comes crashing down like that. But I mean, Nagy was the 2018 coach of the year. You give him credit for that. I was super high on him at first, and then I don't know if I've ever gone as sour as I have on a coach or just a person in general as fast as I did with this guy. But it just, if you paid any attention, if you're a Bears fan, to his press conferences, his responses to the media, I'm sure you've seen him on Twitter or on social media, because most of the dumb stuff he would say would go viral. Anyway, it's just a lot of I'm not gonna miss it. I want a guy to get in here that has some NFL experience, not necessarily has been a head coach, but has coached at the NFL at some level, preferably a coordinator of some kind. I know there's talks of going and getting Jimmy Harbaugh from Michigan. Honestly, wouldn't hate that. I don't love the whole go get a first-time college coach route. There is talks of potentially going to get Ryan Day, as he was Justin Fields' head coach at Ohio State. Not gonna lie, I would not love that. As far as the GM goes, get a guy that actually loves football to run this organization. Get Ted Phillips as far away from making football decisions as well, because he's still the president of football ops, I think, and the CEO. No, maybe he's just the CEO, but he's a business guy, he's a numbers guy, and they have him running a football team, trying to make football decisions, that just needs to stop. So hire somebody. I mentioned before, Bill Polian is a part of this search for some reason. I have no idea why, but he is a guy that went and had a lot of success in the NFL. So hopefully that translates and he speaks some sense into this front office if he still has any left. But it's a great feeling, and now we're just kind of sitting around waiting. And how long is this process for hiring the next regime here going to take? The next head, did we get a head coach first? Do we hire the GM first? I mean, I'd like to have a GM in place before we hire a head coach, but
yeah,
with some of these guys that just got released, a la Brian Flores, I don't know how much time you're going to have for that.
Yeah. Well, before we continue with coach and GM, we have to start here because everything you guys do is going to revolve around Justin Fields.
Mm-hmm.
Before we talk about how the losing a coach, coordinator, GM affects a young quarterback, I want your overall honest opinion on what you saw from Fields in his rookie season with the Bears.
I think we saw a lot of a lot of flashes and a lot of stuff that makes you think he could be a successful starting quarterback in this league. I think you saw a lot of stuff like the turnovers and not really taking care of the ball that you don't love, and you know that he's going to have to fix if he wants to stick in this league. 2-8 as a starter, as a rookie. I think a lot of that time, it doesn't look good, but again, I think a lot of it had to do with who was in charge. It had to do with Nagy having his head up his ass and just being like one of the most ignorant head coaches, most stuck in his ways head coaches I've ever seen in my life. Just bad play calling, bad situational awareness from the coaching staff. And I mean, they didn't give him any reps with the ones up until like a couple days before he started his first game, like not through camp at all. It was all Andy Dalton. I mean, I've never been in the NFL, obviously. So,
yeah.
But everybody I've heard talk about that, every former player has mentioned that it is important to at least get your feet wet, get somewhat familiar with these guys that they're expecting you to, play with it when it actually matters, not just in practice. But my honest evaluation is, I don't know if I can give a full evaluation of what we saw from Justin Fields, because I think he was set up to fail. I don't want to say it's not fair, because it's the National Football League. It's not supposed to be easy. You're not supposed to just come in and light the world on fire. But if you look at just the revolving door that offensive line was, just the refusal to let him use his feet in certain situations and bootlegs or whatever, I believe he's got a bright future in this league. I believe he can be a very good starting quarterback. Just the way he moves his feet, the way he's able to get out of the pocket and pick up extra yards on a broken play. We saw that on multiple occasions with with Foles out there for that one game. Shout out to him for getting the win, though. That was so funny. And I mean, Andy, you saw it with Andy Dalton yesterday, which I don't know why we're having him roll back 15 yards to try to throw a pass on 4th and 1 multiple times when you have David Montgomery averaging 4 yards per carry. But that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, is the terrible situational awareness, the play calls to make you scratch your head and go, what are you doing? You need a half a yard. Why are you not running the ball? But even in those situations where Andy Dalton had to, run for his life and then get sacked 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage, Justin Fields, maybe he doesn't pick up the first down. I would assume he would. He was a guy that actually would be able to take off and make a play with his feet. I don't know. I just feel like there's so much potential there, and I don't want to say it was wasted in year one. We saw good things. We definitely saw some bad things that I'm not going to blame turnovers completely on coaching. Like fumbles were bad, just taking care of the ball in general. He did have trouble with in a couple games. His touchdown to interception ratio isn't going to look great, but I really feel like you can't 100% judge what this guy is off of that year. Now, let's say he comes out, has a nice little sophomore slump, starts with this new coach and starts to struggle as well. Maybe you start to have that conversation, but I feel like it's too early to just completely give up on this guy. And I feel like whichever coach they do choose is going to be put up in a really good spot, depending on how he, fills out his coaching staff around him. Let's get a pretty solid offensive guy in here, a real quarterback guru or something, to truly mentor this guy. Maybe the guy that Matt Nagy was supposed to be,
or he thought he could be.
Yeah, or thought he was supposed to be.
So obviously, when you look at a young quarterback, one thing that's extremely important is consistency. Consistency at head coach, coordinator, weapons, offensive line. I don't think I've hit. When you look at the Bears, they're obviously switching coaches, switching GMs, switching coordinators. Their offensive line's already a revolving door, and their number one receiver, or expected number one receiver, I think Mooney took that spot at the end of the year. Yeah. Allen Robinson is not on his way back. I mean, you look at this situation right now for the Bears, they can't screw this up
No.
because like they have to find the guys that are best suited for a Justin Fields. And, you know, what does this tell you right now? I mean, are you nervous as a Bears fan? Seriously, as a
Oh,
100%,
of course I'm excited that we got rid of these guys, but there's always the thought in the back of my mind. It's okay, how are we going to fuck this up now? It's, is this another? Do we get another Mark Trestman type hire?
Yeah,
Whereas
no, I don't think
what is going on? But I think you're right. They're in the position where they have to get this right. I mean, let's face it. Over the past 7 years, this franchise is 48-65.
Yeah,
one of the most historic franchises in the NFL. I mean, it is just more fun. I mean, of course, I'm biased speaking as a Bears fan. When the Bears are good, when there's somebody to challenge the Packers in the North.
mm-hmm.
Obviously, we saw Minnesota get rid of Mike Zimmer as well after, that team seemed way too talented to only win 8 games this year. So, they're going to be going after it, especially with how explosive their offense has proved to be. But yeah, man, it's just with the young quarter. I feel like it's such an attractive job. It's somebody worth a damn is gonna want it, or they're. Yeah. Again, I talked about Bill Polian and how it didn't really make sense how he's a part of it, but it kind of makes me feel a little bit better that they're grabbing somebody that has experience as a GM, somebody that spent a lot of time with multiple NFL franchises. So that makes me feel a little bit better about it. But you look at it, man, they've got to nail this hire, coach and GM.
Yep.
Then we have no first round pick, no fourth round pick. So you got to nail your second and third, really nail those. And one thing I will give Pace credit for was he kind of found some pretty decent guys in the late rounds of the draft. Mooney was a later round draft pick. David Montgomery didn't go till the third round. The guys they picked in the sixth round this year are not bad. They got Larry Borum in the fifth, and he started at right tackle almost the entire season. So Pace wasn't all bad. I think it was just, nobody's ever going to forget taking Mitchell Trubisky at 2, though. That's just something you never forget. And nobody's ever going to forget giving Mike Glennon $18.5 million guaranteed. But think about this. How many GMs do you know that got the chance on like 4 different quarterbacks? Mike Glennon was the guy. He paid Mike Glennon. Then let's draft Mitchell Trubisky number 2. No, it's Nick Foles is replacing Trubisky. No, Andy Dalton is our guy. That's 4. And then Justin Fields. He drafts him 5 quarterbacks. Again, he's gone now, so it doesn't matter. But 5 quarterbacks in 7 years.
I've never understood the loyalty you got the Bears had to Pace. It didn't make any sense to me. I don't think he should have been there last year.
No, exactly.
If you knew those two were eventually going to leave, why did you use him their first year with Fields?
It does. It makes 0 sense. It makes 0 sense.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I'm going to throw you some names. We're going to get a little more positive. The future of the Bears. Let's think bright. Let's get the guy. Let's find him on the Alec Walt Show. I'm going to throw out some names. Let's start with the guy who should have an NFL coaching job, but doesn't due to just incredibly poor decision-making in South Florida. What are your thoughts on the new candidate, Mr. Brian Flores?
I would love it. I think Brian Flores would bring a mentality that this team has been lacking for the past 4 years. A hard-nosed, just true football guy, good football coach. I have yet to hear one bad thing about him as a football coach. Obviously, anytime you get a guy from the Belichick coaching tree, your guy, Billy Bell, they haven't all necessarily panned out as great head coaches, but I feel like Brian Flores was an outlier of that group. I really, really liked what he was doing in Miami. It doesn't make sense to me that this move to get rid of him, at least at this point of his tenure there, obviously the 1-7 start, but then you talk about winning 8 games in a row. They just won their last game of the year against the Patriots too. It just felt like a move that doesn't make sense. And it also feels like a give me higher. Like it's just one that you definitely didn't expect him to be there. I know I did not expect him to be on the board as a potential candidate or a guy that would be available to hire. But I feel like it's one that he has to be, if not your first call, one of your first calls. Like I think it would be a home run. I think it would be an absolute home run.
Are the Bears good enough to convince Bieniemy to leave the best quarterback in the game?
Oof. May
Should the Bears be interested? Yes. Should he be interested in the Bears?
They absolutely should be interested. I think you could pique his interest with Fields and what he would be able to do. I'm not comparing Justin Fields to Patrick Mahomes
having a young QB
whatsoever, but it's having a young quarterback. It's having a roster that, I mean, you mentioned earlier, we're going to Allen Robinson most likely gone. I mean, like, if you look at there are way too many guys that this roster is going to look really different.
Yeah.
Really, really different next year. Akeem Hicks probably gone as well. We're going to be missing a couple other names on defense. I'll be curious to see what they do with the offensive line. I don't think they're going to bring back like a 41-year-old Jason Peters. At least I hope that they don't bring back a 41-year-old Jason Peters. Jimmy Graham's contract is expiring. Allen Robinson, which if you would have told me last year that we were just going to basically just let him walk for like nothing, I would have been screaming and pulling my hair out. And now I'm just like, all right, see ya. Don't let the door hit you in your ass on the way out.
Yeah.
It was just, they stopped throwing him the ball. He did miss some games, but the whole contract dispute really changed his mindset, at least from my perspective, where he just felt like he didn't want to be there at all. Had zero interest in playing for the Bears this year. But we move on. You get a guy like Darnell Mooney to replace him, who I love. He's just absolute stud. I still think we need another true potential number one guy, like a big bodied receiver, which is what we're really lacking right now. I saw a mock draft that had us potentially taking Jahan Dotson out of Penn State with our number one pick in the draft, which would be in the second round. Which, I mean, he's not huge, but he's like 6'1", but he was a freak. I would love him and Mooney on the outside with Justin Fields, but Bieniemy, I think it would be a hard sell, but also he's a guy that just feels like he should have had a head coaching job by now. And if he did get offered one, feels like a guy that might feel like it's the time to take it finally, after being passed over for other jobs he probably should have got before this.
McDaniels.
Does he want to leave? Does he want to leave Bill, or does he want to leave the Patriots and potentially like a head coach in waiting job right there? I mean, we've seen him leave before too. You know, we're talking about Denver. We saw him. Didn't he take a job for like 2 days and then go back? Indy. Yes, that one. So, I mean, he's great. We've seen what he's done with Mac Jones this year, and that offense. That, I mean, everybody, the talk was who are they supposed to throw the to? You know, then you go get guys like Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry and really up that offense. Then obviously the run game was absolutely insane. So I mean, I guess my question: do you think that Josh McDaniels would leave for a head coaching job, or do you think he's staying put and waiting for Belichick to retire?
I certainly think that him kind of taking over after Bill is something that could be very realistic. The question really is, when is Bill going to leave, and does it fit the right window? Now, when you look at New England's situation, obviously the roster is pretty solid as it stands. I mean, Bill's the guy who constructed it, but he has worked alongside Mac Jones, and if he believes that's the guy he can work with for the future, I don't see any reason for him to leave if there is a realistic opportunity for him to replace Bill. Now, when you look at Chicago's situation, obviously working with the young QB and developing another young QB is something he would have to do in Chicago. What he did this past year, even though at the beginning I thought it was extremely boring, did benefit Mac Jones. He was someone who at times I thought their offense was way too conservative. They were checking down to their running backs way too much, which is why the loss of James White was absolutely brutal to start the season, because his best check down guy wasn't there. While even Jonnu Smith was the guy that took a while to get going in New England. I still think overall for the contract that he signed didn't really live up to expectations. So should he have interest? I think Fields makes him a little more interesting. I think how he developed Mac Jones definitely makes him a more interesting candidate for other teams who have young quarterbacks who simply they can't screw up the hire with, which is exactly your situation, which is why I think he should definitely be a candidate. But hey, money talks. If he gets the offer that he wants, I'm sure he'll take it. But I don't think he's. I'm sure he's comfortable in the situation he's in with a young QB and the stability that Bill pretty much figures everything else out for him.
Right. And I think it would be a nice hire. I mean, obviously he's had experience for so long with the best coach to ever do it.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say, in my opinion, I don't even know if that's an opinion anymore. I think it's just a fact at this point. So, but it also feels like he could be set up for that Patriots job, or maybe it's okay, let me go take this Chicago job now. In 2 years, if that opens back, I'm coming home. Make the video. Sometimes you got to go back to move forward with them, that Matthew McConaughey thing. But yeah, man, I think literally of the three guys you've mentioned, I'd take any of them, and I'd be excited. You want just somebody who's competent. If I'm going to compare it to a guy that got fired here from this flag right behind me, the University of Illinois, former Bears coach that I was not happy when they fired him, a guy that got fired for going 10-6 in Chicago. Lovie Smith, his 5-year tenure at Illinois, when he was fired, they hire a guy like Brett Bielema, who, again, at the time doesn't seem like a sexy hire, but is a guy that won multiple Big Ten championships at Wisconsin, went down to Arkansas, it didn't really work, went up to New England to work for Bill Belichick, then was working on the Giants staff as well with Joe Judge. But then now it's just, there's this whole new view about the Illinois program where it's just like, oh my God, they're recruiting the state of Illinois. Oh my God, we have a competent football coach. That is all I'm asking for, is a competent football coach, Chicago.
I got some more names here who I think are competent football coaches.
Good.
Do you know who Kevin O'Connell is?
No.
He is the next McVay OC.
Uh-oh.
He's 36 years old, so he's young. But he's someone who obviously has worked alongside McVay, who has been pretty successful with some of the other assistants he's had go to other teams. Other names that I think you should consider. What are your thoughts on Kellen Moore?
I wouldn't hate it. I mean, the people have, had some gripes with the Dallas offense this year. I don't know if that's 100% on him, but I like what you see. I mean, Dak is averaging like 350 yards a game. They have an elite running back in Zeke. I mean, I would not mind it at all. Dallas, I mean, they're very fun offense to watch. What do they have? Multiple 50-point games this year, or if not 50, like 45 or 42 or whatever plus. So wouldn't hate Kellen Moore. The Kevin O'Connell guy, it's funny you mentioned Sean McVay, because I think it's a little less now, but I just remember like when he got hired, it was like in those next like couple years, it was like, oh yeah, and by the way, he like knows Sean McVay. He's had a conversation with him one time. You're hired. If you have any association with McVay, it's like, all right, yeah, I think we should give this guy a look. Which obviously he gets results. I think McVay's a really good head coach. I'll be curious, do the Bears go that really young head coach route? We've seen it. Brandon Staley's a pretty young guy. Obviously, McVay, Zach Taylor is young. Cliff Kingsbury is not a very old guy. But I mean, those are just some names off the top of my head. A guy you haven't mentioned yet that I want to bring up, that I don't know if you have him on your list, but I think Brian Daboll would be interesting. Offensive coordinator for the Bills.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, Josh Allen is just one of the most fun dudes to watch in the NFL. But I really like how he's built that offense around Josh Allen. And, Allen can make plays with his feet. I think Justin Fields can make plays with his feet. I don't know. I mean, Daboll, he's worked for Nick Saban. He's worked with Bill Belichick. Obviously, now he's the offensive coordinator for Sean McDermott. But I think he's a name that I definitely would not mind seeing as the next head coach of the Bears. But there's so many dudes out here, which is why as we're kind of talking this out, it makes me feel a little bit better about them, not getting it wrong. Cause it's like, all right, there's so many like good names. So if you sit down and think about it, it's like, all right, I'd be pretty happy, with almost any one of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, even like, would you hate Doug Peterson?
Now you're kind of losing me there a little bit, but I mean, he won a Super Bowl. That's my rationale. Fuck. I think they could do worse than Doug Peterson. Yes. So, I mean, maybe I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd love it, but I think I could like learn to love it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, there's definitely a lot of good candidates there for the Bears. Obviously, the objective is to find the best guy for Justin Fields, but you got to make sure someone owns that locker room. And even though everyone loves the McVay assistants, I think Zach Taylor's rise here in the AFC North is definitely helping the case for any of his assistants right now in LA. But a 36-year-old with a must-win situation, that's why I think getting a veteran would make sense, even though Kellen Moore is used to the pressure in Dallas.
Right.
Because when you're in Dallas, it's different than any other sideline in the National Football League.
So I've already seen Bears fans on Twitter wanting to bring Vic Fangio back as the defensive coordinator.
I think that'd be brilliant.
I would absolutely love it. I think he's the best defensive coach in the NFL. And he's a coordinator guy. Like, it sucks that, when he finally did get his first head coaching shot, it really didn't work out for him. But some guys are just coordinators, and he's a damn good defensive coordinator. He was the architect behind that Bears defense the year they went 12-4. So I would love to get him back. And another name floating out there is Jim Harbaugh up at Michigan. Obviously he has his best year as the head coach this year at Michigan, gets walloped in the college football playoff semifinals. And now there's talks of him potentially listening to NFL offers, but Bears fans on Twitter are calling for a Harbaugh head coach and Fangio a defensive coordinator. And I wouldn't hate it either. I know, say what you want about Jim Harbaugh, but when he was in the NFL, when he was the head coach over in San Francisco, they played winning football. They went to a Super Bowl. Then, he's just a likable dude. He's just such a football guy. I'm a football guy's guy, and I'm in on Harbaugh. Not that I think it would take a lot also to get him away from Michigan. And I have spoke on how I don't love going to get a college head coach and moving them up, especially if they have no NFL experience. I think it's a little different. I know I'm like going right against myself saying, let's hire Jim Harbaugh.
It's not like you're picking Urban Meyer.
Right. It's a little different because he came from the NFL.
Exactly. If you have that background, it's not like, again, it's not like you're hiring someone who's never been in the NFL before. So, Hey, I think the Bears have a lot of quality candidates here. From a general manager standpoint, that's a whole nother show. Maybe interested to see who wants to go for that type of position with the Bears. They don't have a first-round pick in your first season. Plus, you have a roster that's kind of all over the place. You have some decisions to make with some of the key players on the defensive side of the football. So there's a lot of things going on in the city of Chicago with its football team. But Andy, before I let you go, man, thank you again for joining me. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
Absolutely, Alec. It is always a pleasure. I love joining the show. I always thank you for letting me come on and rant about whatever it is. This time, I'd say this was one of the more exciting topics that I've been on the show.
You're on for like terrible reasons.
Yeah, you
got Fields, but it's just like, oh Jesus, like some of the other stuff hasn't always been the most positive.
No, it's always been super negative, and just let Andy go for a little bit. Anyway, one GM name that I'll bring up, and I think it would be a huge long shot. See if you can pry him away from ESPN. I would not hate Lou Riddick as a GM. I think he's pretty good in the booth. One of the only things that makes the Monday Night Football booth listenable, if you ask me. But I know he hasn't been a GM before. We just talked about getting guys with experience. But I just think he's a good football mind. I like how he thinks about the game. But anyway, you can find me at the Brew Party. So I'm actually releasing an episode Tuesday morning with Caitlin Leaner from the Bear Down Girl podcast. If you'd like to hear more about this topic, that would be the perfect episode for you. So it's the Brew Party Podcast. We are wherever you get your podcasts. We're on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, any of those good ones, or you can just go to www.thebrewparty.com. It's got links to all of our episodes, ways to listen, or you can watch them on YouTube. You can go over to youtube.com/thebrewparty. Subscribe, throw us a like, throw us a comment. Would really, really appreciate it. Always appreciate coming on the show. Like I said, Alec, and you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at The Brew Party, and we are on Facebook at The Brew Party Podcast. Yeah, wherever you get your podcasts, all that good stuff. So, yeah, let's go. Go Bears. Hire somebody. Just hire somebody competent. Hire somebody that at least knows what they're doing and doesn't have to put BU everywhere. But
well, Andy, best of luck to your Chicago Bears, and I cannot wait to hear your reaction to whoever the Bears sign.
Oh, look out for it.
Coach. Let's go. That's going to be it for this episode of the Alec Walt Show. I'm your host, Alec Walt, alongside Andy Hopper. Who do you believe the Chicago Bears should hire as their next head coach? Feel free to give me your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more of my exclusive content. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you very soon.